I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The decision was not announced with ceremony. There were no trumpets, no cheering crowds, and no carefully rehearsed palace statement. Instead, Prince William sat at the end of a silent table, placed his hand over a hidden court document, and issued an order that stunned the royal household. A senior member of Queen Camilla's private circle was to lose a royal title immediately, and the reason buried inside those pages threatened far more than one person's position. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William received the sealed file during a meeting at Windsor, and the silence around him deepened the moment he recognized its markings. The Royal Archive, the collection where palace records are stored, had listed the document as missing for years. Yet now it had returned with authorization papers linked to Lord Adrian Vale, one of Camilla's closest advisors, whose influence reached deep into her household. The prince read the final page twice. His fingers tightened against the edge of the table, but his voice remained controlled as he declared that Vale would lose the title Royal Steward of the Crown Household. That title was a ceremonial office, allowing its holder to represent the monarchy, attend restricted functions, and exercise authority in the king's name. William removed every privilege attached to it and barred the advisor from future royal appearances. Charles said nothing. The king stared toward the empty chair usually occupied by Camilla and understood the danger. This was not simply punishment for one courtier. It was a direct strike against the queen consort's private circle, and it threatened to expose how far that circle had operated without clear limits. William then turned to the page that changed everything. The recovered court record showed that Vale's appointment had been approved through an altered recommendation, containing words the monarch had never authorized. Charles looked down, visibly wounded by the discovery that his authority had been used to strengthen another man's position. The shock deepened when an aide uncovered a handwritten note attached to the file. The message indicated that someone inside Camilla's household knew the wording had been changed and ordered the original version placed beyond archival access. William realized the deception had not been careless. It had been protected. Camilla learned of the removal before the meeting ended. She demanded to see the prince privately before the decision became public, and her message carried no apology. But as the palace prepared to erase Vale's title from the official record, everyone at the center of the crisis began preparing for a more personal battle. For years, Lord Adrian Vale had moved through royal corridors with the confidence of a man who believed his position could never be questioned. He was more than an advisor to Queen Camilla. He was her shield, her messenger, and the keeper of conversations never entered into official records. Now, with one signature from William, that protection had collapsed, and every person who had once relied upon Vale was forced to decide where their loyalty truly belonged. Camilla received the confirmation beside her private secretary, but she showed no anger at first. She read the removal order slowly, placed it face down, and kept one hand resting over the page. The decision stripped Vale of access to ceremonial planning, private household briefings, guest approvals, and discussions about the future roles of William and Catherine. Those privileges had allowed him to influence who stood where, who attended, and whose voice carried weight inside the monarchy. The queen consort finally looked up and asked, "Did Charles approve this?" Her secretary hesitated. That pause told her enough. Vale had entered her household during the years when her position remained fragile, and he had become the man she trusted to manage pressure, resistance, and private hostility. Losing him was not simply an administrative defeat. It felt like the removal of a wall that had protected her for years. William felt a different kind of wound. The prince believed the system had allowed unofficial influence to reach Catherine, Prince George, and the future direction of the crown. He remembered decisions that appeared minor at first, changed schedules, withdrawn invitations, and ceremonial positions quietly reassigned. Now each one looked connected. Catherine confirmed those fears during a private conversation with her husband. The princess recalled several occasions when arrangements shifted immediately after meetings between Camilla and Vale. She had once dismissed those changes as palace confusion. William no longer believed confusion explained them, and she saw the betrayal harden his resolve. Princess Anne delivered an even darker warning through a documented briefing prepared for the prince. She explained that removing one title could expose a wider network of courtiers who had benefited from Vale's authority. The advisor had not worked alone. Others had protected his access because his influence protected theirs. Charles summoned Camilla without staff present. The king slid William's order across a small table, but she refused to touch it. He offered no defense of Vale, and his silence wounded her more than accusation could have done. Camilla finally leaned forward and told her husband that William did not understand what the advisor had been protecting. She then added that the hidden document had been concealed for a reason. That warning changed the crisis completely, because the file was no longer merely evidence of a false title. It had become the final piece of a conflict that began months earlier. Every royal rupture has a moment that appears harmless when it happens. A changed chair, a rewritten speech, a name quietly removed from a program. For William, the point of no return came during a private investiture rehearsal at Windsor, when Catherine discovered that her role had been reduced without explanation. The change lasted only a few minutes, but the order behind it exposed a hidden chain of influence and placed Lord Adrian Vale directly between the future king and his family. William had already noticed the pattern. Catherine's timings changed without warning. Younger members of the family were moved away from important moments, and decisions arrived bearing authority no one could clearly trace. An investiture is a formal royal ceremony, where honors are presented, and the Windsor legacy rehearsal mattered because it was meant to define how the next generation would stand beside the crown. Catherine arrived expecting to deliver the formal address assigned to her. Instead, she found the speech removed, and her ceremonial position handed to a member of Camilla's household. The princess stopped beside the marked chair, lifted the replacement card, and quietly asked William whether he had approved it. He had not. The shock in his face told her everything. Lord Adrian Vale called the change a routine protocol adjustment. The advisor had used that phrase before, whenever William questioned last-minute alterations. Camilla defended him privately, insisting that he was protecting stability during a difficult period for Charles. To her, his control prevented disorder. To the prince, it was beginning to look like hidden power. William confronted Vale in a side chamber after the rehearsal. The future king asked who had ordered Catherine's removal, but the courtier remained calm and said the instruction came from the highest authority. William believed he meant Charles. For several painful hours, the prince thought his own father had deliberately weakened his wife without warning him. Charles denied it during a recorded private conversation requested by William. The king repeated that he had issued no order, approved no change, and knew nothing about Catherine's reassigned position. His anger quickly gave way to something deeper. Someone had used his name to control his family, and the monarch realized his authority had become a weapon in another person's hands. Princess Anne then requested a documented internal review. She discovered that Vale's title allowed him to transmit recommendations without attaching the original author's name, creating a path for decisions to appear royal even when their source remained hidden. The same unusual freedom had shaped ceremonies, schedules, and private access. The investigation eventually uncovered the missing court document. It proved that the questionable authority used against Catherine had also helped create Vale's own position. William understood the truth at last. This was not one insult or one altered ceremony. It was a system operating behind the king's authority. Armed with that knowledge, he no longer wanted an explanation from Camilla's advisor. He wanted the queen herself to answer for the power exercised in her name. The confrontation took place without secretaries, legal officers, or palace aides. William entered believing he would force the truth into the open. Camilla entered believing she could still prevent him from destroying a man who had protected her for years. Between them sat the hidden court document, its altered recommendation clearly marked. Neither raised their voice at first. Yet within minutes, the future of her entire inner circle was being decided across that table. Camilla had demanded the meeting before the removal order entered the court circular and household register. The court circular is the official record of royal engagements and decisions, while the household register lists the people formally trusted to serve the crown. Once Vale's name disappeared from both, his fall would no longer be private. It would become permanent. William agreed to meet, but he arrived with 2 pages. The prince placed the original recommendation beside the altered copy and pushed them toward her. One carried Charles's narrow approval. The other expanded that authority after the king had signed it. Camilla stared at the wording but did not answer immediately. The queen consort insisted that Lord Adrian Vale had spent years making painful decisions to protect her place beside the monarch. She reminded William of the hostility, the distrust, and the years when every mistake surrounding her threatened Charles as well. To her, the advisor had defended stability. To him, Vale had built power from fear. William asked why Catherine had been weakened at Windsor. The future king demanded to know why his father's name had been used, why private schedules had shifted, and why his own household had been treated as something Vale could manage. Protecting Camilla, he said, never gave anyone the right to misuse Charles, diminish his wife, or interfere with the next generation of the crown. Camilla reached toward the hidden document. William immediately placed his palm over it. The prince told her the evidence would remain under his authority until the review was complete. That single gesture ended any illusion that she still controlled the meeting. The queen finally admitted that Vale's title had been accelerated through an unusual process. She claimed she knew the appointment had moved faster than normal, but she had never seen the altered wording and had never ordered anyone to change it. William then revealed the second annotation. A handwritten line referred to the Queen's verbal approval, suggesting someone had deliberately used her authority to complete the appointment. Camilla's composure shifted. For the first time, she understood that her own name might have been used just as Charles's had been. Camilla warned him that public disgrace could make Vale retaliate. The former advisor knew private decisions involving Catherine, the king, and the royal succession strategy, the plan governing how power, duties, and public roles would pass to the next reign. That threat forced William to face the most dangerous question yet. Could removing one title unleash secrets powerful enough to destabilize the crown itself? A prince cannot simply erase a royal title because he is angry. The monarchy survives through warrants, delegated authority, household law, and the sovereign's final consent. Yet William had not acted impulsively. Before facing Camilla, he had spent hours with constitutional advisors, tracing every signature connected to Vale's appointment. What he discovered gave him more than moral justification. It gave him the lawful power to reverse the title and placed King Charles before the most painful decision of his reign. William learned that Vale's position was not a hereditary honor passed through a family. It was an internal royal household designation, meaning it depended on active service, personal trust, and a valid recommendation from the sovereign. Once the original approval was shown to have been altered, the title no longer rested on lawful authority. It rested on deception. The prince also held temporary delegated authority over future household and ceremonial matters. That delegation allowed him to act in areas linked to the next reign, but only when the king's original consent remained clear. Because Charles's wording had been changed, either the monarch or William could revoke the appointment. Charles read the legal summary alone. The king reached the passage confirming that his language had been expanded, removed his glasses, and set them beside the page. He did not look furious. He looked wounded. His own name had been used to create power he had never intended to grant. The monarch feared what would follow. Supporting William would humiliate Camilla and suggest that her household had operated beyond his control. Yet protecting Vale would make the crown appear weaker still. It would tell every courtier that personal loyalty mattered more than truth. William spoke carefully when he faced his father. The future king said refusing to act would not protect the queen consort. It would trap her inside a scandal built by the very people who claimed to defend her. Charles listened without interrupting, but the pain in his face deepened. Princess Anne then delivered a documented account from the Internal Review. She confirmed that 3 memoranda had passed through Vale's office, using authority broader than the advisor officially possessed. One reduced Catherine's role at Windsor. Another limited William's access to appointments inside the king's private household. The third remained sealed, and its contents had not yet been fully traced. Charles took the revocation warrant. A warrant is a formal written order carrying royal authority, and once signed, it would permanently end Vale's position. The king held the pen above the page and asked whether any path remained that could avoid public disgrace. William answered quietly, not without hiding the truth again. Charles signed. The monarch then warned his son to prepare for retaliation. Too many people had depended on Vale's influence, and too many careers had been built around his access. The signature made the removal irreversible, and before the ink had dried, the consequences began moving through every corridor of the royal household. By morning, Lord Adrian Vale's name had disappeared from the royal household register. His office access was suspended, his ceremonial insignia was collected, and every event bearing his authority was placed under review. The removal was swift, but its human cost was immediate. Staff members who once lowered their voices when he entered now avoided his gaze. Camilla watched the machinery of the palace turn against her closest advisor, and understood that she could no longer stop it. Vale received the formal notice inside his office. The order confirmed that his title, ceremonial privileges, event authority, and access to restricted planning meetings had been revoked. Those meetings were private sessions, where senior royals and trusted staff shaped future ceremonies, duties, and public appearances. Losing access meant losing influence at the very center of the monarchy. The former advisor read only the first paragraph before his expression changed. He removed the ceremonial pin from his jacket and placed it beside the unsigned response form. That small piece of insignia had once marked his trusted place within the household. Now it looked like evidence of a life that had ended in a single morning. William moved quickly. The prince ordered a full examination of every decision made under Vale's disputed authority, including ceremony placements, patronage recommendations, staffing changes, and private briefing access. He knew the review mattered, because those choices had shaped Catherine's position and could affect how the future royal household was formed. Camilla called Vale through a private recorded line reserved for household communication. The queen consort apologized for being unable to protect him, but he did not offer comfort. For the first time, the normally controlled advisor admitted that he felt abandoned. She tried to explain that Charles had made further intervention impossible. He answered that loyalty had disappeared the moment it became costly. Charles then asked his wife not to interfere again. The king spoke without anger, yet the firmness in his voice carried greater force than shouting. Camilla understood what he had chosen. Institutional survival now stood above personal loyalty, and her husband would not risk the crown to save the man who had served her. Palace security soon uncovered something darker. Several archive requests from Vale's office concerned William's future household and Catherine's expected authority after accession, the moment when the prince would become monarch. One access log showed that the hidden court file had been removed days after the Windsor rehearsal and returned without its original attachment. Camilla entered the emptied office after Vale left. She found the ceremonial pin resting on the desk and closed her hand around it. Her composure finally broke, not only because he was gone, but because she no longer knew how much he had hidden from her. Then Vale made one final request. He wanted a private meeting, not with Camilla, but with William. The man stripped of power was ready to face the future king alone. carrying an explanation that could deepen the betrayal or finally bring the truth into focus. When William entered the room, Lord Adrian Vale was no longer wearing the pin, title, or polished confidence that had defined him for years. No lawyers were present. No palace secretary sat between them. The former advisor stood beside a chair and waited for the prince to speak first. William did not. The silence forced Vale to confront what the title had allowed him to become, and what he had done in the belief that protecting Camilla justified every boundary he crossed. Vale had requested the meeting as a condition of surrendering every remaining personal record connected to his former role. Those records included private notes, copied briefings, and internal instructions never entered into the official archive. William agreed only after Princess Anne confirmed through a documented review that no institutional representative should interrupt a direct account of how the altered recommendation had been created. The former advisor finally spoke. He admitted that he had expanded the language of Charles's recommendation after being warned that the original title would not give him enough authority to defend Camilla's interests. The king had approved a limited ceremonial role. Vale transformed it into something far more powerful. Vale insisted that the queen consort had never ordered him to falsify the document. He said her dependence on him had become so complete that he convinced himself silence meant approval. Camilla trusted him to protect her from hostility, and he turned that trust into permission she had never actually given. William did not soften. The prince told him that devotion became corruption the moment he used the monarch's name and Catherine's position as tools. Protecting one woman did not justify weakening another, and loyalty did not erase deception. The confession went deeper. Vale identified the household official who physically removed the original document from the royal archive after Charles questioned one of his interventions. That archive is the secure collection where formal palace records are preserved. The concealment began because the advisor feared the king would discover how widely his authority had been stretched. Vale then pushed a sealed folder across the table. Inside was a private memorandum showing that Camilla had rejected a proposal to reduce Catherine's future role permanently. The queen had allowed dangerous influence to grow around her, but she had not approved every act committed in her name. William accepted the folder, but refused to restore the title. The future king told Vale that confession could explain betrayal without erasing it. The advisor lowered his head, knowing the final consequence would remain. The truth changed William's judgment. Camilla was responsible for failing to control her circle, but not for creating the false authority that had corrupted it. Now he faced a harder choice: destroy her reputation publicly, or separate her failures from the crimes committed in her name. His decision would not remain behind palace doors, because the scandal had already captured the attention of the entire country. The story reached the public before the palace completed its final statement. Within hours, broadcasters interrupted regular programming, commentators questioned Camilla's influence, and crowds gathered outside Windsor's gates. Yet one image came to define the day: a newspaper front page showing an empty ceremonial chair beneath the words, "William removes the Queen's power broker." For the monarchy, the crisis was no longer private. Every silence, every expression, and every absent name became part of the verdict. The palace confirmed that Lord Adrian Vale's royal household title had been revoked because the documents supporting his appointment were invalid. A royal household title is an official position granted to someone serving the crown, and its authority depends on lawful approval and continued trust. Once that approval collapsed, every privilege attached to Vale's role collapsed with it. Charles and William approved the action together. The official statement stressed that point because the monarchy could not allow the removal to appear like a rebellion by the prince against the king. Their united decision showed that this was not a family argument disguised as discipline. It was a direct defense of royal authority. Outside Windsor Castle, the public reaction became impossible to ignore. Crowds gathered beneath television lights, while copies of the Crown Chronicle were held above the barriers. Its front page showed Vale's empty ceremonial chair beneath the headline, "William removes the Queen's power broker." That single image turned a hidden palace dispute into a national judgment. A leading broadcaster called the decision the clearest sign yet that William would draw a hard line between personal loyalty and royal power. The future king, the report declared, was showing that affection could not protect authority gained through deception. Camilla watched the coverage alone. The Queen consort heard commentators question whether she could still be trusted to control her own household, and each word deepened her humiliation. She had not ordered the altered document, but the people around her had acted with freedom, created by her trust. Catherine felt sympathy for her pain. Yet during a private conversation, the princess told William that shielding Camilla from every consequence would repeat the same culture of silence that had allowed Vale's influence to grow. He agreed, though the choice still carried personal cost. The palace then released a limited finding. It confirmed that Camilla had not personally ordered the alteration, while admitting that weak oversight within her circle allowed the abuse to continue. 2 additional courtiers surrendered honorary responsibilities after their names appeared in the internal review, proving that the old network had been permanently weakened. William later arrived at a scheduled appearance without answering questions. The prince placed a reassuring hand behind Catherine's shoulder, and she stayed beside him as the cameras captured their united silence. The country had judged the scandal through headlines. Now the deepest consequence would be decided in one final conversation between the Queen and the man destined to inherit the crown. The final meeting did not end with triumph. William had removed a false title, broken an influential network, and defended the authority of the crown. But victory carried no celebration. Across from him sat Camilla, stripped not of her position, but of the certainty that loyalty could protect those closest to her. What remained was a harder judgment, whether the monarchy would answer betrayal with revenge, or whether it could impose accountability without destroying every person caught inside the failure. William presented the completed findings without softening a single detail. The prince included Vale's confession, the altered recommendation, and the private memorandum proving that Camilla had not ordered the falsification. He also confirmed that the removal would remain permanent. Every decision made under the disputed title would be reviewed, and her household would now operate under stricter oversight. The future king placed the former advisor's ceremonial pin on the table. That insignia was the symbol of Vale's official place inside the royal household, and without lawful authority behind it, it meant nothing. Camilla looked at it for several seconds before pushing it back toward William. The gesture carried no argument. She understood that it no longer belonged to her circle. Camilla finally admitted what she had refused to say before. The Queen consort explained in a recorded private account that gratitude had silenced questions she should have asked. Vale had protected her during years of hostility, and she had trusted him so completely that she stopped examining how he used power. Her failure was not creating the false document. Her failure was allowing loyalty to replace judgment. William answered with equal honesty. The prince admitted that his anger had nearly led him to treat Camilla as the architect of every act committed in her name. Evidence had forced him to separate her weakness from Vale's deception. Yet understanding her failure did not mean erasing its consequences. Lord Adrian Vale permanently lost the title Royal Steward of the Crown Household, along with every privilege and future ceremonial role attached to it. The official who removed the original document from the archive was dismissed. The remaining members of Camilla's circle surrendered independent access to royal appointments and protected records. Charles supported the reforms in a formal statement and repeated that support privately to his wife. The king made clear that William had not attacked the sovereign. He had defended the authority that others had misused. Camilla kept her place beside Charles, but her network would never again operate as a separate center of influence. She accepted the restrictions, because restoring trust required more than regret. William's decision delivered the final verdict. Loyalty may explain misconduct, but it cannot excuse deception. The hidden document did more than expose one false appointment. It forced the crown to choose between protecting its inner circle and protecting its integrity. And under William's hand, integrity won. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.